My name is Joe Colburn. I work with Integral as a consultant and a senior software engineer. My social is Joe Tech. If you look at Twitter, you'll see I don't get on there very often. But also on GitHub, it's Joe Tech. And today I want to talk about how to use ChatGPT and OpenAPI is what I should have written here, to streamline the development process. So we'll talk about how to make things a little bit faster in your development lifecycle, get rid of some of the things that are just kind of mundane and make your life a little easier so you can do the fun stuff. So first, what is ChatGPT? Well, it's highly trained artificial intelligence. So it uses different models that are trained at different levels with different amounts of training, different data sets that are designed to handle different tasks. And they do so at different costs. None of it is super expensive from an API standpoint, but there is some benefit to knowing what the different costs are if you're using them at scale. Each request costs tokens. It uses tokens for the request, and it calculates tokens based on the response size and also difficulty. And there's a free allowance, so you can go and use it for free. Both ChatGPT or the API, you can sign up and play around with it quite a bit. Fun fact, this whole presentation, planning for it, doing some testing, hitting the API a bunch of times, everything that I did cost me about 8 cents. And when I say me, I mean that's out of the free allowance of $18 they gave me. So you can go quite a ways with your requests. It's designed for human interaction. So ChatGPT is. It's based on human language, and so it's designed to accept human language, human developed questions in the way you would naturally speak, and respond to them in a way that's useful. It's kind of like you're chatting with a regular person that's helping you out. And then the API is pretty much the same, but without the friendly interface. So if you want to do things that are maybe not as geared towards the human conversation, then the API might look a little bit better for you, and it's also a lot better for automating some of the processes. Some of the use cases, and this is not at all exhaustive, there's so many use cases, but some that bubble to the surface that might be more useful for people would be generating text for filler, for maybe testing, or it sounds like I lost the mic for a second there. Generating text for filler, image generation, that's in beta, and we'll look at all of these. It's kind of like Stable Diffusion, but different use cases. If you're familiar with Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, those are pretty popular these days. Creating code, that's a big use case here, where you can ask it to create code for you, and you'll be surprised at some of what it will develop for you. And then also when you get it to create code, or even with your own code that you provide, it will by default explain some of what the code does, but you can also ask it to explain code to you. You can feed it a function and say, what does this function do? So if you got a senior engineer who developed a function you're afraid to ask them, well, first of all, don't be afraid to ask them. Just ask them, what does this do? That's how you learn. But if they're not available or whatever, and you find code online, you're curious about what it does, you can throw it in there and ask ChatGPT, what does this do? It can also debug code for you. And as we'll see in a demo, it can proactively suggest things that can prevent bugs in your code or in the code that it develops for you, which was a fun accidental find for me. And then it can help you augment and or refactor your code as well. It also can give you bad or good jokes, maybe. Your mileage may vary. I asked it when I was getting ready. And actually, before I tell the joke, I asked it to create an outline for me for a artificial intelligence-based talk for a conference, and so here we are. It did some of that work for me. But I did ask it to make an opening funny joke for me, and this is what it gave back. It said, "What did the AI say when it was asked to solve a difficult problem?" "No problem, I'm an artificial genius." So, like I said, your mileage may vary. You may get a better joke or a worse joke. I make no guarantees there. Okay, so why should you care about ChatGPT? Well, tedious is, tedious. It's the boring stuff that you don't want to do, like developing a list of names, for example. Those kind of things take time out of your day. You can go and search for a list of names and then try and format it in the way you want, or even a whole data set, a list of names, fake names and addresses. You may come across stuff that is out there that actually has real names in it, and maybe you don't want that in your test data. Maybe you're doing a demo for a presentation, and you don't want real data in it. So those are good reasons to have an API, an artificial intelligence do that for you. Another example too is, I don't know if anyone here has been in a position where they need to test something that's going out to prod, and you need a test set of data, and someone pulls data from prod. It's a big no-no. You shouldn't be doing that. Never have real client or user data in your test code or in your test cases. And so this is another way to kind of help avoid those kind of things. Pairing is really beneficial to you as a developer. I pair all day with another human being, and it provides a ton of benefit, but sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you're working on a project in a different language. You're learning Go or Python or whatever it could be at home by yourself, and maybe pairing is not an option. Well, pairing with an AI is better than coding solo. And the three top reasons on the list under this on this slide are the same as pairing with a human being. You can learn about new packages and software that you might not have discovered before. You can learn about new approaches that you may not have thought about in your development process. And you can catch bugs early, which we'll actually show in one of the examples I'll give in a little bit here. And then the fourth one here is writing thoughtful unit tests. That is something humans do a little bit better, maybe. So we're a little bit better about we have to think about doing TDD and writing tests first. But you can ask ChatGPT or the API to write unit tests for you. So maybe you ask it for a certain function, and if you're not doing TDD and you get that function first, then you can come back and say, okay, well, that's great, thank you, but can you also now write unit tests for this function? And it'll just whip those up for you. Unit tests really kind of get it put on the back burner a lot of times because people don't want to do them. It's not the exciting part of writing code. And so this can help out with that quite a bit as well. And then a question that I've seen online, which I know some people have been worried about, is AI going to take my job? As a developer, that's potentially a real fear that this thing can whip up code. What am I here for, right? Am I going to get fired tomorrow and they're just going to employ ChatGPT and do my job? And the answer is no. No, it's not going to take your job if you continue to grow as a developer and you use the tools that are available. Those tools should not replace you. Those tools should augment your development process. It should make you a better developer and put you in higher demand over someone who doesn't know how to use these tools. So it is beneficial to learn how and when to use these tools, and that will give you more ammunition for what you do day to day, and it'll make you a more valuable person, both to stay where you're at and to be available for any new opportunities as well. Okay, it's still not 4 o'clock, so I've got a lot of time to fill. So I'll take my time here. I was worried I might go over, and we'll see how it goes. So I have a graph here that isn't really very self-explanatory, but The question here is, how does ChatGPT work? And essentially, they asked a computer, tell me how to, what was it? It was describe the moon landing to me like I'm a 5-year-old. I believe that's what they have in their paper or their documentation. And it started out with an explanation that was maybe way too detailed, and then there was another attempt that was devoid of any detail or flavor at all. And the goal here was to get it to respond in a way that makes sense and is usable. So to do that, they ask the question over and over again, and they feed it feedback. So if you have a pet, right, you ask it to do something, you give it a treat. And it does the thing again because it knows it's going to get a treat. And if it does something it's not supposed to, you don't give it a treat, right? And that's the same kind of principle here. You train the artificial intelligence. I'm really kind of dumbing this down mostly because I don't know fully the deep details of it. But that's essentially how that works, is you train it on what responses are better and which ones are not. And then it uses that data and those learnings to fine-tune its responses to you. And so there are some different layers here, and I have to use my cheat sheet to look real quick at what my notes say here. So reinforcement learning from human feedback, that's the one I needed to see. So before we get to that, there's a top layer here that is safety. I don't know if anyone remembers from 2 or 3 or maybe more years ago. I time travel a lot, so I don't know. There was an AI that was given a Twitter account and told to just go learn and have fun. And it became abusive and racist and just a real mess, right? And so, I mean, you might as well just tell it to go look at YouTube comments as well. It's not really the best laid plan. It has no protections there from learning things that you don't want it to learn. So, you know, they learn from the history here of others and put in a safety layer. So if you ask it for things that maybe are a little bit alarming, if you start trying to get into a conversation with ChatGPT that is questionable, it will very politely guide you out of that or tell you it cannot answer that. So go to ChatGPT and ask it about politics, and you'll see that it goes very much middle of the road and doesn't want to talk about it. Below that is this layer of, and I've already forgot it, so I have to go look it up again. Reinforced learning from human feedback. So that's kind of what I was describing earlier, where they have a whole bunch of people asking it the same question in different ways. And then based on those answers, those people are giving feedback whether it was a good question. And if you ever use ChatGPT, you see a thumbs up or a thumbs down right next to your answer. And every time you give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, you are helping train that model that's in use. So that's how that works. It continues to grow and learn from that in positive ways because they have that safety layer on top. And then the bottom layer that it's all based on is the GPT-3, which is the original training sets. Okay, so we're not at thank you yet. It's too short. So let's dive in. Where am I going from here? Oh, I do have to escape out of that. Okay. So I have the GitHub repository, which was in the links. But I'll go through it. You can follow along later if you want. What I want to do is talk about some of the models. I made kind of a bit of a cheat sheet summary here, and it does link to the official models documentation. But here's what I found from my own testing and just from what I read in the documentation that I could summarize and some requests. So again, originally I put the combined cost of all the tests on this page was about 1/4 cent, which is really, really small. So that was nice to see. Originally, I started out, I'm like, oh, $18, that's not going to go far when I'm using the API. And it actually, it goes quite a ways. So you get a lot of mileage out of it. So I asked the API. Well, first I asked Google. Because I didn't know the answer myself, I wanted my baseline. And I asked Google and Bing, so I'd have two good answers to start from, and they were both the same. Tell me where Martin Luther King Jr. was born. Because it's Black History Month, I thought that would be a great question. Google and Bing both said January 15, or sorry, I asked when, right? And Google and Bing both said January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. That's what they both responded with. I asked, let me take a step back first before I get into each model. The way they have the models set up, I know before I mentioned the models are trained in different ways on different data sets and at different levels. So some are trained more than others. And so you have different models to choose from at different levels. And so for example, Text Ada is a text-based model that is at the lowest, like simplest level. So very simple things you want to ask it, you would start with that model. And then they have Babbage and Curie and then Da Vinci for the models for text. So their recommendation is that you would start with the simplest model, which is usually the cheapest, and usually it's going to be the fastest model because it has less thinking to do about your answer. And also, maybe not so much a coincidence, the bigger models that are more expensive and can do more, like Da Vinci, they're already in high demand for people trying to do complex things. So if you're just testing things out, start with, if you don't know which model you're using yet, start with one of the simpler models that are cheaper, like Ada, and see what kind of answers you get. So we started with Ada. I made an API call, and I asked it the same question. I asked the exact same prompt to each model. And Ada said, King was born on March 14th, 1926 in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm like, okay, that's not the answer I was looking for. I asked Babbage the same question, and it gave me a completely different answer. And then I asked Curie the same question, and it got the answer I was looking for. So with anything AI, your mileage may vary. You may get answers that are based off of, again, this gets fed data from the internet, from wikis, from people thumbs upping and thumbs downing an answer. Maybe a lot of people didn't know what the answer was, and they said, well, it gave me an answer and gave it a thumbs up. So you never know. It's always good to take it with a grain of salt and think about that when you're developing towards OpenAI. So I asked Curie, and Curie gave me that answer. And interestingly enough, Curie took a total of 23 tokens. I don't know if you can read that there. I try to make everything big enough to read. So it shows you the number of tokens in your prompt, which mine was 9, the completion tokens, which was 14, and the total tokens in this case was 23. And the previous answer that was wrong took 5 extra tokens. So do some experimenting and figure out which model works best. And also, if you use a lower model, one of the cheaper models, and you don't get the answer you're looking for, the answer seems a little odd, look at your prompt as well. Maybe the prompt could be changed. Maybe you can ask the question in a different way or whatever. And we'll see that later as well. And then Da Vinci, the last one, we asked the same question. And it also got the answer right. And it took also only 23 tokens. So Da Vinci and Curie nailed it with the same number of tokens and the same answer. But Da Vinci, I think, I'll have to look it up. But I know Da Vinci is more expensive overall to ask, and it takes longer. I don't remember what the response time on that was, but I believe it was maybe on the order of 3 times slower than Curie. So that's something definitely to factor in, especially if you're building towards an app. I'm just doing experiments in an API. So if it takes 20 seconds, it's no big deal. But if you've got someone sitting on the other end of a website and they're waiting for a response or looking at their phone on your app, and it's taking 20 seconds for the one request, then that's a problem, and you need to find ways to mitigate that. And the best way, the first way probably at least, is to look to the models that are faster, that are going to respond faster. So we do have some other models, these codex models, but before we get into that, I wanted to show an example in Postman of, it's got really huge, okay. I'll show an example in Postman of using a text-based model for just a pretty simple request. So I may have to make this a little smaller to fit things. Okay, so here's our model. And I should say ahead of time, to use the API, I'm sure many of you know already that you'll need to sign up for an account and get a token and all that, or an API key. But I have my API key stored in my globals. And so all I have to worry about here is the request. So you have an endpoint that you make your request to. In this case, it's completions. And all of the models, all the text-based models have the same endpoint of completions. And then you have to tell it which model you're using. So in this case, it's a text input. You tell it text-query-001. And then you give it a prompt. You give it a maximum number of tokens that you're willing to spend on it. And there is a cap. You can only go so high. That's all in the documentation. And then there's a temperature. And the way the temperature works is it's a 0 to 1. And 1 is, I believe, give me an answer that's pretty much the same answer. I'm going to get the same answer every time. I want you to be very reliable with it. And 0, closer to 0, is more give me an answer that is pretty much what I asked for, but it doesn't have to be the exact same answer every time. So that may or may not be valuable depending on your use case. So in this case, I asked it to create 10 fake records, and then I said as a separate sentence, each record should contain a name, street address to, city, state, zip, and then also as another sentence, I asked it to return the list in JSON format. And as always, the results can vary here. So let's just send it and see how long it takes. In the past, this took, I think, 3 seconds. Yeah, we're back to 3 again for this. And the result set, I don't even know if I can rely on what it's going to show me, but we'll walk through it. So you get an object that is text completion. You get an ID. It feeds you back what model you used. And then it gives you choices, which is what it thinks you want, right? And so this one gives me a list of names and addresses, and it looks like it's got most of the data that I want, but it's just got empty for a lot of these. So I've got names, and I've got starting addresses, which are all the same. So it's a little bit off. One of the important things to look at when you're hitting the API is the finish reason. So if you get a finish reason that is anything other than stop, that tells you that maybe it didn't complete the request in the way you would expect it to. In this case, it did. I gave it enough maximum tokens to use. And so it completed the request, but not satisfactorily to me. But it did tell me that it used up 290 tokens to do it. So there is another way you could do this. For example, if I don't like that response, I can just go back and change my prompt. Let's try actually a slightly easier one here. So I'm going to say return a list. I'm going to say an unnumbered list. It likes to number lists. If you ask for a list, it's going to put numbers in front of it. So this is part of the process too, is you're learning how to craft your request. And I know from my experience that I want to say unnumbered. So I'll say return an unnumbered list of first names. And we'll just keep it simple there. Actually, I'm going to say, I'll say in JSON format. See if I can get it to save a step for me and spell JSON correctly. Okay, so we'll send that off again. I was going to theorize that it should be faster, and it was, because it has less to do. And it should use less tokens. I think we were 259 last time. We can double check that. Yep, 52 tokens this time. And part of the reason is the prompt is smaller, and the response is smaller. And if we go up to the response, it numbered them. Jerk. Okay, so sometimes it's not going to fully adhere to what you're looking for, and you'll just need to double check your prompt and find a different way to do it. But we'll move on from that one. We could resend that request over and over again and get all sorts of different answers from it. Let's talk a little bit about code models. So these are the codex models, is what they're called. They're based on GPT-3 models, but they're also trained on billions, with a B, of lines of public code, and they're designed to understand and generate code. I'm sorry, I'm just going to read off the page so I don't have to memorize it all. And they're strongest in Python, which is good to note, but they're also good for JavaScript, Go, Perl, PHP, Ruby, Swift, TypeScript, SQL, and Shell. And I have a couple of examples that we'll go through here in Shell and JavaScript to kind of emphasize that point. For these tests, these API tests that I ran, the request was write a shell script that loops through all image files in the current directory and renames them, replacing all spaces with dashes. So I started with the simpler codex model, which was code-Cushman-001. And I have notes about each one here. And this one, my note is that it's faster and about as good as DaVinci below, at least for this test. It won't be for all. And here's what I got out of it. I got this block of code. Pretty simple code. Probably could have written it faster than I figured out how to use the API and plug it in, but it is useful for automating things like this. And it does one thing that is very notable here, right? So if we go back up to the prompt, I asked it to loop through all image files, and what it gave me is that its summation of image files means just JPEGs. It doesn't care about other image files. So that's something to note when you get your responses. Take a close look at them and make sure that you're actually getting what you want out of it, and figure out how to recraft your response. And we'll get to that in 1 second. You can see that the cost for this, we're still relatively low. The prompt tokens were 25, because my prompt was a little bit long. And the completion tokens were 39, because it's a small piece of code that it gave back. And the total tokens were 64. So, and I did save a copy of the script that it returned, not that one, the new one. But I first said, before I realized that, maybe I should work on my prompts first, I thought, well, I'm using the wrong model. I thought it would handle this. And so let's just jump right to DaVinci, which is what I suggest not doing, learn from my mistakes. So in this case, I did jump to DaVinci, and I gave it the same request. And I got a response that was fairly similar, but now it just wants all files. So even if they're not images. So it also didn't fully understand what I was looking for. This one cost pretty close to the same. Was it the same? It was the same. It's the same cost, which is fun because the code is actually different, but it was close enough. And it didn't really get what I wanted, so interestingly, that one took 95 seconds to return. And it did not fully complete. It had a bunch of extra code. Sometimes when it completes early because it didn't finish the request, it will just repeat what it's got so far, which is kind of fun. And an indicator that you should look at your response. But in here, we can actually see, I didn't show it in here, but the response was not stop, the response was length, which meant that it went beyond my max request. In any case, my max request was 2,000 for that. It went over it, and the resulting code was not exactly what I was looking for. So what I did is I went back to the prompt, and I asked it to loop through all BMP, JPEG, JPG, and PNG files. So instead of saying images and letting it determine what that was, which it got wrong both times, at least for what I wanted, I was very specific about what I wanted. And this is going to cost a few more tokens. Previously, it cost us 25 tokens, and in this case, it costs 32. So there's a cost trade-off there. But the response was far better. So in this case, the response actually looks for BMP, JPG, and PNG. I think it alphabetized those now, I'm just realizing. And then it replaces spaces with dashes, as I asked it to do. And in total, it was only 6 more tokens. So I actually have a copy of that in the repository, and we can jump to that real quickly, and then we'll go into the other examples. So let me go over this. I called it image renamer script, but I just called it nospaces.sh. So it's just an sh file. I have it in here, and I put some images in a folder called backups so that if you pull down this repo, you can just test it yourself or have ChatGPT API or ChatGPT generate code for you, and you can just name yours no spaces and put it in the same directory and test it with this command line I've provided here. I won't go into the details of that, but in here I'll just show what it did. So essentially, I don't know if that's hard to read, but essentially it prints out the list of files. You can see they have spaces in them. Excuse me, I accidentally clicked on the image. You can see they have spaces in the file names currently, and then it does its work and then lists the files again. And in this case, GIF file does not have any treatment to it. It still has spaces because we didn't ask it to do anything with those. And it did do its work on the other files. And then I just have a little command if you want to clean it up so you can run it again. Okay, so that's the image script. I've kind of been going on and on. Does anyone have questions before I move on to the next one? Sure.
So I know ChatGPT API is not out there, so of course you have to use GPT-3. But I've noticed, and I don't know if you've crossed what you put into GPT-3 and actually put that into ChatGPT to see the difference. But ChatGPT seems to be, I don't know if it's trained better, but like for example, I put in your example here, and it gave me 4 files right away, 4 file types. So it gave me JPEG, spelled both ways, PNG, and GIF. So have you played around with that and noticed the difference?
Yeah. So the question, in case anyone didn't hear, is have we played around with the same request in ChatGPT versus the OpenAI API? The answer is yes. That code I only did, the one we just did, that example was only done in the API. The results were good enough that I didn't actually move over to ChatGPT and test that out. But I did try the next example, which I'm about to show, in the API first. And I was hitting maximum token request limits and other issues with just not getting back what I was hoping for. And so I moved over to ChatGPT, which actually seems better for using natural language anyway to describe what I want. And the workflow, in terms of trying to do it in a way that's faster for you and saves you time, which is kind of the point, was faster. It was just a lot cleaner workflow to just go type it into a page, and then when I get something back, just say, hey, can you refine that in this way? Versus having to craft a new JSON object or modify yours to do a new request. And we can show that in 1 second in this next thing that I'm going to demo here called Build a Game. Is there any other questions before I do the game? Cool. Okay, so the next experiment that I did is I asked ChatGPT to build a game for me, and I don't want to show it off yet. I want to show you what it looked like. It's at capacity right now. Let's refresh and see if we can change that. So there's my request. Okay. So here's the request I did. I made a very simple game, in-browser game. I wanted to do something that was simple enough that it could just be run out of an HTML file and not be an hour-long example during this demo. So I asked it, this was my prompt. It's kind of lengthy, but I wanted to be somewhat descriptive because I want to try and get really close in the first shot. So I asked it to write a JavaScript page that makes an image move around the screen randomly. At the top right of the page is a counter that starts at 0. Each time the user clicks the image, the counter increments by 1. The higher the counter total, the faster the image moves. So that's what I asked it. I thought I was being descriptive enough, and it gave me a response. This is the response. It says, sure, it's very friendly. It says, sure, here's a simple JavaScript code snippet that achieves what you're looking for. And it gave it this. And I did save this file. I went back and saved this morning because I wanted to show what the initial response looks like. So here it is. I dare any one of you to try and click that. I'm not going to do it here. I think it's a fox. I don't know. It gives you a random image, right? So, yeah. So we're going to go back and try again, right? So I said, all right, look. Oh, and by the way, it does respond and tell you what the code does. So it says, hey, I'm going to be friendly and say, here you go, here's some code. And then after that code block, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the code that I gave you. So it tells me some things, and it tells me to use a set interval, 2 functions, and one of them is to move the image every 10 milliseconds. And I'm a developer, so I didn't read any of this. Honestly, I just dove right into the code, and I'm like, what is going on when I ran it? But then I came back later and read this, and I'm like, well, okay, that definitely is what it's doing every 10 milliseconds. And then the other one to update the speed every second. So it doesn't do it every same iteration of the speed. And then it makes a note about how it moves the image around and the event listener and how it interprets a click. Okay. So I said, well, that's not acceptable. We're not going to use that. And I said, let's make, so I'm in the same conversation here, right? And so it already has the context of the previous request that I asked for. And so when I don't ask it to make a new block of code or a new program, it knows that I'm talking about the thing that it just did. And so I said, make the speed start at 2 seconds and decrement by 50 milliseconds each time the image is clicked. So now I'm telling it very specifically, look, you give me some good code, but there's a very big problem with it, and here's what I want you to fix. So now let's go back to that same code that you gave me. It's like I'm talking to like a developer that just needs very explicit instructions. So I go back to them and say, look, I'm sorry I wasn't very clear. I want you to go back and make the speed start at 2 seconds. And I want you to decrease it, not add to it. Before it was actually trying to add to the speed. I did change the code to make it so I could click on it, and it was actually adding to the speed. That's the only way I knew. So it's friendly again. It says, okay, great. Here's the updates, the code. It reiterates what I asked for and gives me a new code block. And this code block was close. It still doesn't do exactly what I wanted. And I didn't save an example of this. I wanted to kind of keep it a little bit shorter on time. So, but it does explain to you what it does. But there's something important I want to point out before I get into what it didn't do. What it did do that I did not, again, I didn't read this the first time, that I did not notice initially is that I noticed it in the code, but I didn't notice that it mentioned it here. It says, additionally, we've updated the second set interval function to set a minimum value of speed to 50 milliseconds in case it gets too low due to rapid clicks. So I'm going to tell you that's not possible. Once you get down to 50 milliseconds, you're not clicking it. But let's suppose you get a robot to click the image for you, and it can do it fast enough. This is creating a fix before you think about the bug that's going to happen to prevent the bug. So that's important benefit to this to think about. Okay, and so it's signing off on this one, telling me, let me know if that helps, like, hey, we're done here. And we kind of were, because the code is good, but it was not totally ready. So there was a couple things I wanted to do. The way the code worked, it didn't exactly perform what I wanted, but the changes I wanted, the cost of time and effort for me to word craft what I wanted in the way that it would understand and make the changes I wanted was not, it was greater than the amount of time it would take me to just go change a line of code or two. So that's what I did. I opted for the human intervention, last step in travel scenarios called the last mile, I guess, and changed the code myself, and I ended up with a new program. So I need to refresh it because I changed my screen size. It places this image based on the screen size. And then it starts out with a counter of 0. So that's like your score. I don't remember what my top score is, but it was double digits at best. And then you have a speed, 2,000. And some instructions at the top, I added that just to say, hey, click to begin, and it gets harder, and good luck. So I'm gonna do my best from here. I'm gonna click it, and it'll start the timer, right? And it's gonna go kind of slow. I'm gonna click it again. I know you guys are waiting for something exciting, so I'll click it a few times. This is boring. So it's kind of off screen because I'm so zoomed in right now, but let's click a whole bunch of times. So it's gonna get a little faster now. Little harder to get to it. I got it that time. Oh, come on. Okay, so yeah, 750, I got it once. At 500, it's kind of impossible. A little bit challenging. Refresh it again to get it stopped. So this button, I did not go to Photoshop for that. I went to OpenAPI. So let's go to, this page kind of mostly talks about all the other stuff that I just spoke about in the repository, but I wanted it in there for anyone who wants to come back to it later. That's all what I just described. But here's the optional workflow step that I added in. So you could, if you're familiar with GIMP or Photoshop or Paint or whatever, and you're feeling crafty, you can go create a button. You could go swipe one off someone's website somewhere. Probably not cool. Or you can pay someone on Fiverr to make a button for you. But you know, we're here talking about OpenAPI and how to get computers to do things for you while you go have lunch. So what I wanted to do here was an optional step where I ask the beta image generation in OpenAPI to generate a button for me. So I have an idea of the button I want. I want a red circle with the word click on it. That was my baseline criteria. It could be a little bit outside of that. And kind of had an idea of a size. So I asked it initially to create a button for me that is 200 by 200, and ChatGPT said, read the documents, dude. So right here it actually says in the documentation, they have 3 sizes currently in beta. So went back to my request and modified it to be 256 by 256, and my prompt that I fed it was, well, let me talk about this image generation endpoint. It's images/generations. It's in beta, and it has 3 required things to get a response. It needs a prompt, so it needs to know what to do. The N, which is not super descriptive at all, but you could make a guess, is a number of how many images you want back. You can ask for 1 to 10 at a time, and they limit you to 50 per minute, I think. So you could beef this up to 10 and make 5 requests and then walk away frustrated if you don't have what you want yet. And then the size. And the size is a string format. And then the response looks something like this. It is a URL to the resulting image. And I believe the documentation says you have 10 or 15 minutes to go retrieve that from the URL. So there's a little bit in here about the size thing and that kind of thing. And initially, I asked for an image, initially I just said, give me a red button with the word click on it. And the button was oval shaped, and there was a square one. I tried it a couple times, and it was cropped on one half, so it said click, and then cropped on the bottom on another one. So I went back to the drawing board and I crafted the response that you see there, which is a perfect circle red button with the word click, and I put that in single quotes, on it. And I added not cropped, because now I've learned my lesson. I don't want it to be cropped. So it's not just ChatGPT that learns from the prompts. You learn eventually too. So I did that, and I got an image back. And this one actually, let me go back to this. I'll just send it again. I was going to show you the image I got. It was actually better than the first one. There's no authentication failed. Okay. Don't know why that's happening. Yeah. I was trying to get back to it after I did that. I realized what I did. Oh, it threw it in a new tab. Yep. Thank you. We have Postman people here. Saving the day. All right. Okay, so this is failing because this initial request was too long ago. So I'm not going to get any love out of that. Let me go back and make a new request, and we'll just click on the new one. So you get the idea. You get an image back. It's going to show me how many tokens it ate up. Actually, no, it doesn't do that. But yeah, if you click on the image, and actually this is really close to the last one I got. It capitalized the L for some reason, so it's always fun, doing interesting, fun things to us. But it did give me back an image that was mostly not cropped. Again, your mileage may vary. You'll have to go back and forth with it a couple times. That's why they offer you the opportunity to get 10 images back if you want. And if we go back to this, we can actually try that real quick. As we've previously established, we'll just do like 3. These are cheap. It does not cost a ton to do this. In fact, I'll show you my usage so far this month. So not too bad, right? 5 cents yesterday. Today we're at 3 cents, and I've been doing a bunch even before the talk. So it's not too bad. Okay, so while we're showing that, it took 5 seconds, came back, and we get a response array, a data array here. And you can see there's one image on top, and the second image, and a third image. Maybe it got better with age. It's a little crooked, and there's 2 eyes. But, that's the process, right? You're going to have to look and see what you get out of it. Surprisingly, this is way better than Stable Diffusion with words. Stable Diffusion, if you ask it for words, you get hieroglyphics. Oh, there you go. So there's a solid one, right? It says click. The C is capitalized. Everything else is not. There's a little cursor, and nothing's cropped. So that's a winner. And it only took us asking for 3. So sometimes in like a case like images, you might ask it for more up front, because the cost of asking for 3 in one request is going to be lower than the cost of asking for 3 in 3 separate requests. So just think about those things when you're making requests and figure out what makes the most sense. And if you ask for an image and it's way off, get your prompt right and then ask for 10 of them. I use the same approach with Stable Diffusion. I'll do 1 image when I make a request. And if I get something that looks pretty close, then I start asking for 10 at a time. Okay, so there was one last thing I wanted to go over here. And it's somewhere here. Oh, here we go. I don't want fast click. That's just terrifying. Okay, so let's go back one step here and look at the last thing on my list here is tools and plugins. I did not actually devote a lot of time to this, and I think we're a little under still, But so I don't have any installed at the moment, but I did want to link to these and talk a little bit about what they do. Also, there's a talk tomorrow at I think it's at 2:00 that goes a little bit more into depth about programming with ChatGPT. So I didn't want to get too much into that either, since that's going to be covered quite a bit tomorrow and Saturday. One thing I did want to point out is that before you use any of these, it's important to look at each one yourself and make sure that you're comfortable with whatever information and permissions you share with it. And an example of that is any Chrome browser plugin that can be used on any page is going to need access to read every page. So you want to make sure that you trust those things anytime you install a plugin. Similar with plugins for your IDE, right? If it can read your code, you're working on sensitive client code, it's a consideration that you want to have. So that said, I did come across a few of these for Google extensions that I read through some of the reviews and looked at it, and they were like, this is trash. Like some of the reviews actually use those words, this is trash. This one was much better, highly rated, and it essentially, there's a video here. We don't need the audio for it. Thought there was a video. Let me go back. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So essentially what it does is you do a search like you would in Google, and if it's a search that ChatGPT can help with, like how do you do such and such in CSS, it has this side panel that it builds in, and it responds much like ChatGPT does, where it does this fake typing and fills in an answer for you. So it can actually save you a little bit of time versus going and clicking through 7 pages, and some of them are blog articles that have like 4 pages of why they decided they needed a thing in CSS, and then you get to the code finally. This just kind of goes right into it for you. So it can be beneficial in that way. And then the next one here is an IntelliJ plugin, and I did see some things for VS Code as well. Just do some searches and you'll come across several things. And it works similarly, but in this case you ask it what you want to build, and it'll give you some descriptions of what the process is and some code examples on how to do that. So, yeah. That is pretty much it for now, for this presentation, unless we have any additional questions. We have a little bit of time. We're finishing up early. No questions. I think that's a good sign, hopefully. All right. Well then, if there are no other questions, then I'm going to say, my name is Joe Colburn from Integral, software engineer and consultant, and I want to thank you for your time and for showing up today.